This is my Lab 7 demonstration. This is my code, the lab7_2, which would be for the task 3, the squares. I'm not sure if we have to demonstrate anything other than this or even this, but here it is anyways. Yeah, so the square task, initialization of 81 DA2 and the square task, and the 3. That's the 3 that we needed. Here's the setup for it. I have the connection to the actual Zybo board with the dual pin, the top row being, I think, the ADC and the bottom being DAC. Could be opposite, but one of the pins, one row is for one row is the other. Here's the ADC with the waveform generator going into A0 and ground going into ground, and this is the oscilloscope in the pin 1. So I'm running it already. The waveform, that's the output. Wave gen is just a pulse at 0.2 and 1.2 to show the square. And the square comes up close to 2. It's not the perfect calculation of the square. It's a little high, but my input runs high, meaning that I forgot to calculate in from our last lab the slope. So 1 volt in my input would be about 12,440, I think, or not 12,000, 1,240 or something to that degree. So I forgot to put that into my calculation of the square, which would result in a much higher, because what I did for calculating the square was I cast it as a float, divided by 1,000 to get a decimal value, or the true value of a voltage. So instead of it being like what would be 1.2 volts should be 1,200, for me it would be somewhere in like the 1,300 range, or 1,500 range. But instead of having that in the thousands, it'd be 1 dot something, because that is the true value that we want to square, not the thousands. We don't want to be squaring in thousands, because that would not work at all. So I divided by 1,000, and then I squared it, and then I multiplied it back by 1,000 to get the output correct. But I forgot to actually do the calculation to incorporate that slope, so it's going to run very high in the output compared to the input. Yeah, so that's why it's, I think, like I said, the input is, the high pulse is 1.2, which 1.2 squared, I believe, is like 1.44 or something to that effect. If I remembered what I did correctly, let's do here. Yeah, 1.44 is what it should be. But because I'm running in at much higher than the expected 1,200 of 1.2, it's going to output a much higher value when I square that. So that makes sense, at least in terms of why it's doing that, since I did not account for that. So yeah, that's my demonstration.